Hey, what's going on, guys? Appreciate you stopping by. Man, what a day. It is beautiful out, and I have been outside all day. I got up this morning, made some breakfast, and then headed out. And one of the things that I work on here is trying to do a little bit of secondary income because I work full time, but trying to diversify and make some extra money. And I build chicken roosting trees that when I got chickens, the chickens wanted to jump up on top of things and look around. They like being up high, so I built these roosting trees and then roosting bars. And originally I was using like big branches, and then I started just using 2x4s because the chickens like to have their feet flat. And anyways, I make those among other things, and then I sell them local at different markets and different stores and stuff like that. So I've been spending all day sawing and cutting and sanding and charring because I don't use any stains or shellacs or anything like that. So I char the wood to try to get it to last a little longer and be more repellent to mold and insects and stuff. So anyways, that's what I've been doing today. So I wanted to make you guys a video, and there was a question that came up from one of my other videos, and somebody was asking about tangibles. And in case you are unfamiliar with what tangibles are, at least how I look at them, is tangibles are hard assets, things that you can use, like tools. And when it comes to homesteads and preparedness and self-reliance, tangibles would be things like tractors and tools, chainsaws, just a variety of things that you use in order to exist. It could be cooking supplies, ways that you could access water. It could be a backup water pump or a well pump, things like that. And so the question was basically, how do I rank tangibles, like categories of tangibles? And that reminded me, I'm going to try to do this quick, but that reminded me of a preparedness convention that I went to in Greenville, South Carolina many years ago. And I was there and I was speaking. And there were a bunch of people there that were speaking. And the night before, the day before the convention, a group of us that were going to be giving talks got together, and the question came up: what's the most important tangibles? What's the most important things when it comes to survival and preparedness? And there was a big discussion as to food and water, and food and water is a given. That's how I look at that. You have to have food and water in order to survive, to live. So I look at it, what's beyond that. And next up, people were talking about medical, they were talking about backup power, and then it got into self-defense tools. And then people talked about, being able to have alternative lighting methods, if the grid goes down, transportation, there's all kinds of things. So anyways, that question brought back those memories, and you had these group of people that many of which they were subject matter experts on alternative power. And then there was somebody there, I think, that was a medical person. And, everybody kind of had their opinion. But food and water was right there, right there at number one. So I put together a list. I made a few notes. And again, food and water should be a priority. If you're trying to put back supplies in case of some catastrophic event, or just uncertain times, who knows what could happen. Food and water is definitely right up there. And for me, the number two past food and water is defensive tools. And I'm not talking just firearms. I really look at this as security and defensive tools because, yes, firearms and then all the accessories that goes with that. I love firearms and all that stuff, believe me. But it goes beyond that. You can have driveway alarms, motion sensors, security cameras, surveillance cameras around your property. So that way you are alerted if something or somebody is on the property. There's numerous things such as that. Flashlights, I made a few notes here. Door reinforcement. If you have, your home, but the door can be easily breached, that's not a good thing. So there's a variety of ways that you can reinforce that door to at least slow somebody down. That's part of security and self-defense. Pepper spray is something else. Stun gun. Again, these are not legal everywhere, but you make a decision for yourself in what to do, because in some instances a non-lethal method for self-defense is very, very important. I think past self-defense, that's when you get into medical. Medical, and everybody's situation is different. If you're young, you're 25, 26, 30 years old, and everybody in the family is super healthy, medical might not be nearly as important. Yes, have a trauma kit, have a first aid kit, be trained on how to use a tourniquet, how to use an Israeli battle dressings, things like that. But compared to somebody that's older, and especially for people that have any kind of health conditions, they might need certain medications, certain equipment that would be critical in a grid down or some type of event that occurs. So medical is really important. There was a show, I know somebody is going to know what it is in the comments, but I remember I watched it many years ago, and it showed a family that something occurred in a city. They managed to escape. It seemed like everything they did was wrong, and somebody got a cut. If I remember right, it was the husband got a small cut. It ended up getting an infection. He got an infection, and in the end he ended up dying because they didn't have the simple antibiotics. They didn't have the training on how to clean the wound and keep it from getting infected like that. So I've never forgot that show there. But prescription medications, there are ways that you might be able to stock up on some of those prescription medications in case there's an interruption. Would not be good if you had something that you had to take, and 3 days before you're about to get it, a refill, there's some interruption to the supply for whatever reason. So can you get an extra 30-day or 90-day supply? You can look into it, do some searches and find out. Heating and cooking. If the grid goes down, most people have a grill, like a propane grill or a charcoal grill, and they can use that to cook pretty much anything. But how much fuel do you have? And, I've cooked on a charcoal grill. I've used wood before, but certainly not the most efficient means of cooking. Everybody's situation, I can walk out and I've got acres of wood. I'm not going to run out of wood anytime soon. I like propane. I've got a bunch of propane tanks. So if you have a gas grill, make sure you have a couple of spare tanks. and keep them full. Power and lighting. This is an area that I see ads for all kinds of equipment, these solar generators. There's all kinds of information out there, and I tell you, some of these power banks are pretty inexpensive. I have a couple of small power banks that have AC plugs on them, and here in Maine we have had a couple of severe power outages. I mean, severe, I guess, is a matter of perspective, but where you lost power for a couple days, and those things came in handy. So we have generators. Generators are fantastic. If you don't have a generator and you can get one, I highly recommend it. Generators are great. These power banks can be charged with the generators or solar, and they can be fantastic for charging cell phones, because even if the grid goes down, the cell phones may continue to work, at least for some period of time. They can charge all kinds of batteries. They can run fans, and if they're big enough, they can keep freezers running, refrigerators running, and of course, if you have a generator, you could do that as well. There's small power banks that you can get. I have a bunch of them, and I keep them charged up so that if something happens and the power goes out, I can plug in a tablet, I can plug in a laptop for some of them, and of course I can plug in my cell phone. So very, very important, power and lighting. You know, when it gets dark outside, you want to be able to see what's out there. And where I'm at, where I normally have security cameras that let me know if a deer or a Sasquatch walks through the backyard, well, if the grid's down, that may not be working. So you want to be able to have some light. Now, I'll mention this as well. Starlink is fantastic. I have one. And when we've had power outages, I had a power bank connected to the Starlink, and I continued to have internet, and my cameras continue to work. So just thought I'd throw that out there. We've talked a ton about fuel. So when we're talking about tangibles, if you've got tractors, lawnmowers, chainsaws, all that stuff, fuel and oil for those items are tangibles that are incredibly important. And of course for your vehicles. So keeping a backup stockpile of fuel and oil is very, very important. I've always said have at least a tank full for every vehicle in reserve. So if your car holds like 17 gallons, have 3 5-gallon gas cans. Sanitation is also a big issue. We had lost power and our well pump wasn't working, which means our toilet wasn't working. So that can provide some awkward situations and a predicament if your toilet is not working. So yes, you can use a 5-gallon bucket of water and flush it yourself, and that's absolutely what we did. But you got to have the water. You got to have a way of getting the water. So think about sanitation. And it's so easy to go over and turn the faucet on to wash your hands. Have other ways of doing that, whether it's wet wipes, antibacterial, ointment, soap, lotion, this liquid that rinses easy. All those things are great. And rubbing alcohol is something else that you can use to clean your hands and disinfect and sanitize your hands. So sanitation, of course, keep some spare toilet paper on hand, maybe a case put away just in case. And communication, that's going to be the last one in my tangible list. And there's a ton of information out there on ham radio, GMRS, They talk about long distance communication. They talk about talking to other, people across the country, across the world. I've said it over and over again, an inexpensive pair of walkie-talkies that you get off Amazon, you might be able to get it at Walmart, can give you 1 to 3 mile range. And I find that extremely valuable. For maybe, $20 to $40 for a pair. And depending upon your situation, you have somebody that goes to check on a neighbor and your cell phones are not working. Having the comfort that you can instantly talk to that person by talking into this little radio. And, they're 3/4 of a mile up the road checking, on Aunt Betsy. And you're able to hear back, hey, Aunt Betsy's doing this, and, I got her this, and I got her that. That's very comforting, especially in today's world when we're used to instant communication. So a simple pair of walkie-talkies can be great. If you've got a fairly large property and somebody goes and they have to go to the back of the property, no problem. Instant communication. So that's tangibles. So hopefully that answered the question that was asked. What did I leave out? Are they in the wrong order? Comment below. Let me know what your thoughts are on all this. I didn't get in a ton of details of each single one, but I think you kind of get what I'm trying to get across. So anyways, that's it. I appreciate you guys stopping by. Hit that like button. Consider subscribing if you haven't. Click that notification bell so you are alerted whenever I upload new content. And above all, you guys stay safe. Take care. We'll see you next time.
So I ran from the cities and the noise and lies, found a piece of ground under open skies, hands in the dirt, sweat on my shirt, learning what living's really worth. While crooked men shake hands in rooms, selling souls to corporate suits. Society's sick, but I found the cure. A back road life, honest and pure. They can keep their throne and their golden news. This life out here's my modern exodus. I traded screens for a sunrise, callous palms, blisters, pride, planted seeds where hope